Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Acts of the Apostles. We're in Acts chapter 19, in the midst of Paul's third missionary journey. We saw in our last session that almost all of Paul's third journey is spent in Ephesus, the great city. We're told he spent 2 years there, establishing a strong and vital church. And from Ephesus, the entire province of Asia Minor was evangelized. It's a wonderful, wonderful missionary enterprise. Now, let's pick up the reading today in verse 23. It's toward the end of that stay in Ephesus. The 2 years have passed now. We're into the beginning of the third year. And there is a problem. Though the church has grown dramatically, there has been opposition, and now it sort of demonstrates itself in a disturbance. Let's read about it. About that time, there arose a great disturbance about the way. Notice the Christian movement is called the way of Jesus. Now, there was a silversmith by the name of Demetrius who made silver shrines of Artemis, and this brought in no little business for the craftsmen. He called them together, those who worked in related trades, and said, "Men, you know we receive a good income from this business. And now we see this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and also throughout Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. There's danger, not only that our trade will suffer, but that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." Now, what's going on here? Who is this Artemis that they're worshiping, they're talking about? Who is this goddess this silversmith by the name of Demetrius is concerned with? Now, we know that the central deity worshipped in Ephesus was a pagan goddess by the name of Artemis, also called Diana by the Romans. There was a great temple to her in the city of Ephesus, a magnificent structure. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Many people came to Ephesus to worship Artemis at that temple. Now, it seems that because the gospel was advancing, people were beginning to worship the true God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God who had been revealed through the coming of Jesus, the Son of God. As more and more turn to follow him, they turn away from worshiping these false gods like Artemis. This traffic at her temple is decreasing. And it affects the trade guilds who make money off that worship of Artemis. Now, Demetrius is a silversmith. He makes small images of the goddess and sells them to pilgrims who come to worship at the temple. His trade is suffering. There's an economic impact upon him, you see. And so he gets together those in the trade guilds who make their money off that temple. And they say, "Listen, this guy Paul's been here for a couple of years. This message he is preaching says that the gods we worship are not gods at all. He's causing us to suffer economically, and he's robbing our goddess, Artemis, of her majesty." So a great disturbance arises, turns into a riot, and involves a large number of people. Now, one thing we can see from this is that the gospel is having a tremendous impact. Obviously, large numbers of people are coming to worship Jesus. If it's affected the worship of Artemis in that temple, that was a hallmark for years in Ephesus. If it's affected that, you know the gospel is advancing. But when it starts hurting people's pocketbook, they respond. And so this riot breaks out. Soon there's a great riot in the city, and people begin to shout, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" The whole city is in an uproar. They all rush into the theater. The assembly is in confusion. Some shout one thing, some shout another. It's getting out of hand. Now, fortunately, the city clerk, who is the head administrative official of the city, manages to get control of the situation. He says, "Men of Ephesus, we all know that Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of Artemis in her image. These facts are undeniable. No one has blasphemed our goddess. If you have a grievance, bring it to the courts. We're in danger today. If Rome finds out about this disturbance, they'll call us into question." So somehow he gets the situation under control and dismisses the assembly. Now we're told at the start of chapter 20, when the uproar had ended, Paul sent for the disciples, he encouraged them, he said goodbye and set out for Macedonia. So it's decided that Paul really needs to exit the city. He's in danger, and as long as his presence is there, there could be other riots. So it's decided that the time for his Ephesian ministry has come to an end. So he decides to sail across the Aegean and visit the churches in Macedonia, and then later to go to Achaia, visit those churches he established on the second missionary journey. So we're seeing this, the ending of the third missionary journey. A great church has been established in Ephesus, but there is opposition. When the gospel goes forward, there will be those who will not believe, who will oppose it. So all those things are happening in Ephesus. But Paul leaves behind a strong church and travels over to Greece again to visit the churches he had established on the previous journey. We'll pick up the story in our next session as Paul wraps up the conclusion of his journey, heads back to Jerusalem, and some interesting things await him there. But we'll begin to look at those in our next session. Hope you have a great day today, and I'll see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the Acts of the Apostles.